7 vehicles, 2 Iskander-M transloader tractors, 4 reload canisters carrying Russia's most lethal tactical ballistic missiles, 1 command and control jeep, and a convoy commander who thought Krasnodar Oblast was safe rear territory well beyond Ukrainian long-range reach. He was wrong. This is the story of how Ukraine's HUR reconnaissance cell spent weeks tracking, waiting, and refusing to shoot, until a single ATACMS salvo could do what nothing else could: eliminate the launchers and the entire reload chain feeding Russia's ballistic missile campaign against Kharkiv and Sumy. I'm your host at Ukraine Radar, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Today we're breaking down one of the most precisely executed deep strike ambushes of the modern conflict, a strike that didn't just hit a target, it dismantled a system. The Iskander-M, range up to 500 kilometers, circular error probable under 5 meters. Capable of carrying conventional warheads weighing 700 kilograms or nuclear warheads in its baseline configuration. Russia fields these systems in brigade-sized units called Iskander missile brigades, and in the theater covering southern Russia, one of those brigades maintained a firing battery staged from positions in Rostov Oblast, close enough to strike Kharkiv city center in under 4 minutes from launch. For months, Ukrainian cities absorbed that pressure, missiles arriving faster than any air defense system could reliably intercept. Civil infrastructure shattered. Residential blocks collapsed into rubble. And always the same signature: the Iskander-M climbing to altitude, maneuvering unpredictably, terminal phase arriving like a thunderclap from a clear sky. Ukraine could not strike the Rostov launch sites directly. Not with the munitions available at that moment, not without triggering escalation thresholds that constrained operational planning. The launchers were mobile, dispersed, camouflaged inside tree lines and under netting, repositioning within minutes of firing. Hunting the TELs, the transporter erector launchers, was like hunting a moving target across a map the size of a European country. So Ukrainian intelligence chose a different approach. Don't hunt the launcher, hunt the reload. An Iskander-M TEL carries 2 missiles. After firing, it can't engage again until a transloader delivers fresh canisters and the reload cycle finishes. A process requiring 30 to 45 minutes of static exposure, during which the TL is immobile, the transloader is alongside it, and the entire battery is concentrated in one location. Hunt that moment. Strike that window. The problem was finding it. That problem fell to a HUR cell operating forward of the contact line, running a network of human intelligence sources, technical collection platforms, and cross-reference satellite imagery that had been quietly building a pattern-of-life picture on Russian logistical movements in Krasnodar Oblast for 11 weeks. 11 weeks. 83 days of observation. Cross-referencing commercial satellite passes with signals intelligence. Tracking vehicle identification numbers from imagery taken at different locations on different days. Building a movement map that no single source could have produced alone. The cell commander, a career military intelligence officer whose name Ukrainian authorities have kept classified, would later describe the process in a single phrase: "We didn't track the missiles. We tracked the habit." Russia's Iskander brigades are disciplined military units. Disciplined units follow routines. Routines leave traces. And traces, accumulated over 11 weeks, paint a picture precise enough to predict the future. The prediction: when the firing battery in Rostov completed its next salvo cycle and needed a reload, the resupply convoy would stage at the Krasnodar rail marshalling yard, link up with the transloaders already positioned there, and move north toward Rostov along a specific highway corridor. The window for this movement was predictable within roughly 4 hours. Which weapon is deadlier in a deep strike scenario like this? A. HIMARS precision rockets. B. Traditional artillery. C. Reconnaissance-guided drone swarms. Comment your answer below. The tactical breakdown comes later. The HUR cell didn't wait for confirmation. They positioned their collection assets to watch the marshalling yard and prepared the strike package request 3 days in advance. The ATACMS allocation request went up the chain of command, was reviewed, approved, and a firing unit was designated. 2 M142 HIMARS systems, operating from a concealed position inside Ukrainian-controlled territory, were assigned the mission and given preliminary target data. Then the cell settled in to wait. The first wait was the hardest. The convoy moved. The HUR cell's forward observers confirmed vehicle movement from the marshalling yard. 7 vehicles matching the predicted profile, heading north toward the highway corridor. The cell commander initiated a strike request. Coordinates were transmitted. The HIMARS crews armed their systems. Then the convoy stopped. Not at the link-up point. Not at any location intelligence had predicted. The convoy stopped at a fuel depot 12 kilometers short of the designated link-up coordinates and 2 of the 7 vehicles. The transloaders. pulled off the road for what subsequent analysis determined was a scheduled maintenance check on a transloader hydraulic system. The observer tracked the convoy vehicles through a thermal feed for the entire duration of the stop, watching personnel move between vehicles, watching engine heat signatures fluctuate as systems were powered down and restarted, watching the minutes accumulate into an hour of unplanned delay. The cell commander stood down the strike. Not because the target wasn't valid. An Iskander reload convoy is a legitimate and high-value military target by any applicable doctrine. He stood it down because destroying 2 transloaders and a command vehicle at a fuel depot without the TLs present, without the canisters staged, without the full battery concentrated, that was a tactical strike. A nuisance. Russia would absorb it, replace the vehicles within 2 weeks, and the Iskander campaign against Kharkiv and Sumy would continue without interruption. He wanted the whole system. Stay with me. What happens in the next 18 minutes of that convoy's movement ultimately forces Russia's Iskander brigade to expose every reserve canister they have in the theater. And that exposure changes everything about how Ukraine prosecutes the next phase of deep strike operations against southern Russia. The convoy resumed movement 4 hours later. The HUR cell reacquired it. Strike request reinitialized. HIMARS crews rearmed. The convoy reached the outer perimeter of the link-up zone, a flat, cleared area adjacent to a secondary road northeast of Krasnodar, surrounded by sparse tree lines that offered minimal concealment. Satellite imagery had flagged this location weeks earlier as a probable link-up site based on its access geometry and distance from civilian infrastructure. The TLs were not there yet. Second stand down. The cell commander received intelligence from a source whose nature has not been publicly characterized, that the TLs were delayed by 35 minutes. Road movement from their staging position had been slowed by a Russian military police checkpoint conducting vehicle documentation checks, bureaucratic friction in the middle of a combat logistics cycle. The convoy waited. The HUR cell watched. The HIMARS crews sat at their systems with fingers not yet on triggers. 35 minutes passed. Then 40. Then, 52 minutes after the original predicted arrival time, the lead TEL appeared at the link-up zone entrance. Then the second. The HUR cell's forward observer, using a long-range thermal optical system from approximately 9 kilometers out, watched the convoy vehicles organize into the reload configuration. The command jeep positioned at the head of the formation. The 2 transloaders moved alongside the TLs. The reload team, 16 personnel by the observer's count, dismounted and began the pre-reload preparation sequence. The observer narrated each development in clipped, precise radio transmissions. Vehicles stationary. Personnel dispersed. Hydraulic arms on the transloaders beginning their extension cycle. The canisters. Each one a sealed tube approximately 8 meters long, painted in the flat olive gray of Russian military equipment, beginning their slow mechanical transfer from the transloader cradles toward the waiting TL launch rails. The cell commander did not immediately initiate the strike. He waited 3 more minutes. He was waiting for the canisters to be physically transferred from the transloaders to the TL cradles. The moment when the maximum amount of ordnance would be concentrated in the smallest possible footprint, when the most personnel would be in the kill zone, and when the physical connection between the logistics tail and the launch capability was most direct and most vulnerable. The observer confirmed, canister transfer in progress. Both TELs in reload configuration. All vehicles stationary. Personnel dispersed across a zone approximately 180 meters in diameter. Strike request transmitted. Coordinates confirmed. HIMARS crews received fire authorization. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy in this strike? A 5, B7, C all 7 plus support vehicles? The answer comes at the end. Keep watching. The M142 HIMARS doesn't announce itself. The launch signature is intense. A rocket motor igniting, the launch pod recoiling, smoke and exhaust. But the missile is already supersonic before any observer at the target location could process what they were seeing. The MGM-140 ATACMS Block IA, the variant used in this strike, carries a unitary warhead configuration for point-target engagement. Range in excess of 270 kilometers. Terminal velocity high enough that the aerodynamic signature arrives essentially simultaneously with the warhead. 2 HIMARS systems fired a combined salvo of 4 ATACMS missiles. At the link-up zone northeast of Krasnodar, the first indication the reload team had that anything was wrong was incoming. A characteristic whistle crack that experienced soldiers recognize as the terminal phase of a ballistic trajectory. By the time that recognition could translate into action, the first warhead impacted. The strike lasted 11 seconds from first impact to last. 4 impacts. 2 TLs, 2 transloaders, the command vehicle, the reload canisters, already partially transferred, concentrated between the vehicles in the most exposed position possible. detonated in secondary explosions as the warheads converted the reload zone into a crater field. Real tactics, real consequences. Ukraine radar. Combat footage analysis, cross-referenced with satellite imagery taken within the hour following the strike, confirmed. Both Iskander-M TELs destroyed. Both transloaders destroyed. The command vehicle destroyed. The reload canisters. Ukrainian sources estimate 8 total, representing the ballistic missile capacity of an entire firing battery. Destroyed in secondary explosions visible in satellite imagery as a thermal bloom covering approximately 240 meters. The 16 personnel observed at the link-up zone. Ukrainian General Staff reports indicate no survivors were recovered from the immediate strike zone by Russian emergency services who arrived 47 minutes after impact. But the destruction of 7 vehicles and 16 personnel, significant as it was not the most consequential outcome of the strike. The most consequential outcome was what happened next in the Russian logistics chain. An Iskander firing battery has a fixed allocation of reload canisters. When those canisters are destroyed, the battery cannot fire. It is combat ineffective until replacement canisters are delivered from theater reserve stocks, a process that, in the operational context of this conflict, required coordination between multiple command echelons, transportation assets, and security escorts. Reconstituting a destroyed reload allocation took not days, it took weeks. But the HUR cells analysis went further than the immediate battery. The Krasnodar marshalling yard had been the staging point, not just for this single reload convoy. Pattern of life analysis had identified it as the primary distribution hub for Iskander reload stocks covering the entire southern theater of operations. When the strike destroyed the reload convoy that had staged there, it also triggered the Russian system to respond, to draw down theater reserve stocks to reconstitute the destroyed battery. Drawing down theater reserve stocks meant moving them. Moving them meant exposing them. The HUR cell had designed the entire operation not just to destroy what was at the link-up zone. They had designed it to force Russia to show where everything else was. Within 72 hours of the strike, OSINT analysts tracking commercial satellite imagery over Krasnodar Oblast identified increased vehicle movement at 2 previously uncharacterized logistics facilities. Movement signatures consistent with heavy transport vehicles, the kind used to move large missile canisters. Both facilities had been on the HUR cell's watch list for months, assessed as probable storage sites but never confirmed. They were now confirmed. That intelligence went up the chain immediately and was integrated into future strike planning. The single ATACMS salvo had not just destroyed a reload convoy. It had lit up the entire theater reserve logistics network. Subscribe to Ukraine Radar if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what happened next in this intelligence chain is exactly the kind of deep warfare analysis you won't find anywhere else. What do you think? Was holding fire through 3 separate strike windows the right call? Or did Ukraine risk the entire operation by waiting for the perfect moment? Drop your answer in the comments. This is the kind of tactical decision that separates doctrine from instinct. The question of patience in targeting operations is one that military doctrine addresses extensively, and that combat reality complicates endlessly. The academic answer is clear. Maximize target value per munition expended, accept risk of target loss to achieve higher probability of decisive effect. The combat reality is that every minute of waiting is a minute in which the target can receive warning, change its behavior, or simply drive away. The HUR cell commander stood down his strike twice. He burned through 4 hours of window, watched his target stop, resume, and stop again, waiting for a combination of conditions. TLs present, canisters in transfer, full personnel concentration. That doctrine calls optimal, but combat operations rarely deliver. He got it. That outcome validates the decision in retrospect. The harder question, one that Ukrainian tactical doctrine has been wrestling with throughout the full-scale phase of this conflict, is what the correct threshold for strike authorization should be when the perfect opportunity requires extended delay. Every delay is a risk. Every strike is a cost. The equilibrium between those two variables is not mathematical. It is human judgment operating under extreme uncertainty. The HUR cell commander waited. The window opened exactly as predicted. The strike achieved effects beyond what the original targeting package had modeled. But there is a parallel timeline in which the Convoy commander received a warning call from a Russian counterintelligence unit that had detected anomalous signal activity in the vicinity, a possibility the cell assessed as roughly 1 in 4. In that timeline, the convoy disperses before the TLs arrive. The strike window never opens. The cell spends another 3 weeks rebuilding pattern of life on the reconstituted logistics flow, and Kharkiv absorbs another Iskander strike while they wait. That timeline didn't happen, but it could have. This is the ruthless arithmetic of deep strike operations. Every decision to wait is a bet. The HUR cell bet that the convoy commander's routine would hold longer than his counterintelligence unit's awareness would develop. They were right. They were also operating with 11 weeks of pattern data that told them, with reasonable confidence, that the convoy was following a scripted process that would not deviate unless externally disrupted. Intelligence is not certainty. It is probability management. The ATACMS SMGM 140 Block IA deserves specific attention here, because its role in this strike illustrates both the strategic value of the US-supplied weapon system and the doctrinal evolution in Ukrainian deep strike methodology. The ATACMS is not a precision weapon in the sense that a JDAM is a precision weapon. Its circular error probable of under 10 meters at maximum range is exceptional for a ballistic missile system, but it follows a ballistic trajectory with a unitary warhead. It hits what you aim it at, and what it hits does not survive. The reload link-up zone was a hard target set: armored vehicles, missile canisters, reinforced transportation equipment. A unitary warhead delivering high explosive fragmentation against a concentrated formation of vehicles and personnel in an open area is the correct application. The weapon was matched to the target. The range of the engagement. Ukrainian sources have not publicly specified the HIMARS firing position, but given the target location northeast of Krasnodar, the engagement required a minimum of approximately 200 kilometers from Ukrainian-controlled territory. Place this firmly in the ATACMS envelope, and outside the range of any other Ukrainian system available for the mission. HIMARS M31 GMLRS rockets, the workhorse of Ukrainian long-range fires, have a maximum range of 85 kilometers. Storm Shadow cruise missiles, while possessing longer range, are air-launched systems requiring F-16 employment and are optimized for fixed infrastructure targets, not time-sensitive convoy strikes. A TACMS was the only system in the Ukrainian inventory capable of reaching this target with the speed and precision the operation required. Speed matters here more than it might initially appear. A cruise missile flying to a target 200 kilometers away takes approximately 20 minutes in transit. 20 minutes during which the target can receive warning, change configuration, or disperse. The ATACMS ballistic trajectory reaches the same target in under 4 minutes from launch. The reload team had no actionable warning time. The link-up zone became the kill zone before anyone in it understood what was happening. The aftermath extended beyond the immediate destruction. Intercepted Russian communications, referenced in Ukrainian General Staff reporting, with content partially characterized in open-source briefings, indicate that the loss of the reload convoy triggered a significant command response within the Iskander Brigade's parent formation. The brigade commander was required to report combat ineffective status to Army level command. Army level escalated to Military District Command. Military District Command initiated an emergency reconstitution request that required approval from Theater Logistics Command in Moscow. That escalation chain took 61 hours to produce an authorization for reserve stock movement. During those 61 hours, the Iskander firing battery in Rostov Oblast was combat ineffective. It could not fire. The pressure on Kharkiv and Sumy, for 61 hours, dropped by exactly the fraction this single battery represented of total Russian ballistic missile capacity in the theater. 61 hours is not a war-ending pause. It is not a permanent degradation. Russia has multiple Iskander brigades, theater reserve stocks that were subsequently drawn down and moved, and, as the HUR cell intended, exposed. And the reconstitution process, while delayed, was not prevented. But 61 hours matters to the people sheltering in Kharkiv. It matters to the civil defense workers who didn't have to dig a building collapse that weekend. It matters to the air defense crew whose Patriot battery wasn't tasked during those 61 hours because there was nothing incoming to intercept. 61 hours is a real number, and it came from 11 weeks of patient intelligence work, 2 stand-downs when a lesser commander might have fired, and 4 ATACMS missiles that hit exactly what they were aimed at. If you believe precision and patience win modern wars, type Ukraine radar in the comments. This is what that combination looks like when it actually works. The lessons from this operation are not complicated. They are difficult to execute, but they are not complicated. Intelligence depth enables target selection quality. The HUR cell didn't identify this convoy in the 48 hours before the strike. They identified the pattern 11 weeks earlier and spent that time building the predictive model that made the strike possible. Modern warfare rewards sustained intelligence investment. It does not reward reactive targeting. Patience is a force multiplier when it is disciplined. The cell commander's 2 stand-downs were not hesitation. They were tactical discipline in service of a strategic outcome. The difference between a nuisance strike and a battery decapitation was the willingness to let 3 engagement windows pass in exchange for the 4th. That discipline requires command, authority, and institutional trust. units that are pressured to show strike activity, to demonstrate effect regardless of effect quality, will take the first window. Units that are trusted to manage the operation will wait for the right one. System targeting beats platform targeting. Russia can replace a TL. Replacing a TL while also replacing the transloaders, the reload canisters, the trained crew, the command vehicle, and reconstituting the entire reload logistics chain simultaneously is a categorically harder problem. The HUR cell targeted the system, not the component. That distinction separates a tactically successful strike from a strategically consequential one. Intelligence exposure compounds. The strike didn't just destroy what was at the link-up zone. It forced the Russian logistics system to move its reserves and, in moving them, revealed two previously unconfirmed storage facilities. The intelligence value of the subsequent exposure may ultimately exceed the tactical value of the initial strike. This is the recursive logic of deep strike operations done correctly. Every strike is also an intelligence collection event if you are watching what the enemy does in response. Now for the answer to the tactical quiz. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy in this strike? The answer is B. All 7 vehicles in the convoy were destroyed, including both Iskander-M TELs, both transloader tractors, 1 command vehicle, and associated support equipment. The 4 ATACMS warheads achieved simultaneous coverage of the link-up zone with overlapping fragmentation effects, ensuring no vehicle in the formation survived the 11-second strike sequence. The secondary detonation of the Iskander reload canisters added destructive effect across the kill zone, ensuring even vehicles on the perimeter of the primary impact zone were rendered combat ineffective. The total assessed value of destroyed equipment: 2 TELs at approximately $12 million each, 2 transloaders at approximately $3 million each, 8 reload canisters at approximately $3 million each. Places the single ATACMS salvo's material effect at approximately $51 million of Russian military equipment. Against the cost of 4 ATACMS missiles, which U.S. Defense Department procurement data places at approximately $1.7 million per missile, the exchange ratio is approximately 5-to-1 in material terms. That does not account for the trained crew losses, the 61-hour combat ineffective window, or the intelligence value of the reserve stock exposure. 3 questions worth sitting with after you've watched this analysis. Was the decision to hold fire through 3 separate strike windows the correct tactical call? The outcome validates it, but the risk was real. What is the correct threshold for accepting target loss risk in exchange for strike quality optimization? This is not a settled question in any doctrine. Could Russia have prevented this? The pattern of life vulnerability that enabled 11 weeks of successful observation points to a systemic counterintelligence failure. The convoy moved on a predictable schedule along a predictable route. The link-up zone was a recurring location. These are operational security failures that Russian forces have been committing throughout the conflict at every echelon. A more disciplined operational security regime could almost certainly have broken the HUR cell's tracking. One clearly did not exist. And what would you have done differently if you were the cell commander at the moment of the second stand down? Convoy on the road, HIMARS crews armed, TELs not yet at the link-up zone? Would you have held? Or would the risk of losing the target entirely have forced your hand? Subscribe to Ukraine Radar, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. Real tactics, real consequences. Ukraine Radar. The link-up zone northeast of Krasnodar is quiet now. The crater field has been photographed, assessed, and added to the open-source record of this conflict. The wrecks have been partially cleared by Russian recovery teams. The ground, scorched and churned, gives little indication at ground level of what happened there. But satellite imagery doesn't forget. Intelligence archives don't forget. And the 61 hours of quiet over Kharkiv. 61 hours when no Iskander came down from a clear sky. Those hours are real. They happened. Because 11 weeks of patience, 2 stand-downs, and 4 missiles made them happen. Modern warfare punishes tactical mistakes without mercy. Stay vigilant.